Hello and welcome, friends, to WeHeal with healers Eliana Miranda and Holly Wheeler. We have expansive conversations about healing our hearts, bodies, lineages, communities, and our beloved home planet. We are so happy to invite you into this space. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the WeHeal podcast here with Eliana Miranda and Holly Wheeler. Today we're going to be talking about ancestral healing. But before we get into it, I just wanted to do a little check-in with you, Eliana. So can you share with us a little bit about the vibe of today and how we're feeling?
Yes, I would love to. I think it's important to clue our listeners into the vibration of Holly and I as we enter into this podcast before we even begin. Normally, we kind of show up here with, some curriculum of what we're going to talk about and an outline of how we're going to flow. But this particular energetic archetype of ancestral healing didn't want boundaries. It really just kind of wanted us to show up and hold space for the conversation, not have too many points that we needed to get to, but instead be kind of channels and open receptive vessels for the messages of the ancestors and of these lines that we've all incarnated into, and how we are each here, especially those that are listening to this podcast, here to not only feel what our ancestors have felt, but to heal what our ancestors didn't have that capacity to heal, and hold space for a new generation that might be unbound from the traumas of our history and our her stories. So I'm coming here today off of a couple of weeks of COVID, which I avoided it for a couple of years, though I'm pretty sure I had it at the beginning of 2020, but it was kind of interesting. I posted a post about, working with your grief, which to me is always kind of tied in with working and connecting with the ancestors. And then it was in that day where my body started to have a physical reaction and a response to, I think the post was amplification of what was already kind of flowing through me. We had already kind of set the tone for this podcast and what we were going to talk about on the next round. And so spirit just kind of wanted to sit me down, I think, and have a real conversation with me, and encourage me to have a real conversation with my body and with the grief journey that I'm carrying within my body, and connect me really to some of the vibrations that aren't so high vibe and happy go lucky. And we can talk about all of these like big quantum planes of existence, but when we're talking about the ancestors, we're really kind of talking about our human experience. And that doesn't just mean my human experience or Holly's human experience. It means like the human experience that we as humanity have kind of been walking through to get to where we are now. So I'm showing up hoping that I don't cough too much in the microphone, and that I can hold a clear channel for this conversation, because I have felt that my spiritual connection has been slightly diluted with this virus. So it'll be interesting to kind of open it up and begin the conversations again with this particular topic. But yeah, we do think it's important to just like really kind of drop us in and get really grounded with the fact that this conversation, though it will be enlightening and it will be supportive and it will have great threads of integrity to be woven into the experience of anyone listening, that if you also showed up here today feeling a little off or low energy, or just like, what am I here to listen to, or what are they going to talk about? That's where we're at too. We're also feeling that energy coming into this conversation. So all of you is welcome, right? Your grief is allowed to be here in this conversation. Your memories are allowed to be here in this conversation. Your pain and your trauma is also allowed to be here in this conversation. And we're hoping that by holding the space for it in kind of a sacred and intentional way, that it doesn't have to recreate trauma or recreate pain, but instead we can find a nice healing balm or salve through these words and through this kind of, energetic exchange between Holly and I, but also between all of you who are showing up here to be receivers of this wisdom and these words in this conversation. So, Holly, do you want to share a little bit about how you're feeling coming into all of this?
Yes, sure. I am I know you were saying you're feeling a little bit almost like your spiritual connection has been a little bit diluted with the COVID and everything. And I have been feeling like my body for the last couple of days, there's a lot of like sickness going around, like in our communities, like everybody, it seems, is calling out sick, getting sick, canceling things, and yet again. And so I feel like I've been processing something and I've just been really like tired and low energy, but also feeling very like open and feeling this like Scorpio energy, feeling the eclipse portal that we just went through, and just really feeling like, yeah, just very like the veil is thin right now. I'm very aware of it. So yeah, I feel like we're always like anchoring one half of the spectrum, Eliana and I, feeling like a little bit more like, I don't know, like earthy or grounded, but like your connection has kind of been like dwindle. Like, what did you say? What words were you saying for it? That it had been
Just diluted and like just that
diluted.
channel. Yeah.
Yeah, and that mine has kind of been like extra like potent. So it's like it's funny, I'm like holding a black tourmaline and a clear quartz in my hand, and I'm like, well, okay, that's like both of us right now. You're like the black tourmaline, and, and you're wearing black again, and I'm wearing white. Wow,
Wow.
ridiculous. This always happens to us. Anyways, so yeah, that's a little bit about where we're at, and in the spirit of being just uh real. We wanted to share that with you, and the channel that this is coming through, and that this is coming through the ancestral healing talk that we're about to dive into. Um, yeah. So, and I think everything that you said, Eliana, was so perfect and kind of takes us into why it is that we want to talk about ancestral healing today. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, Eliana?
Yeah, so it was like right before that last eclipse in Taurus where Holly and I met and we recorded our last conversation. And, and at the end of our conversations, we always kind of tune into what wants to come through next. And the topic of ancestral healing or connecting with your ancestors seemed resonant to me at the time. And I didn't necessarily know why. It wasn't until we showed up here where um, I've kind of understood that it's because we're in Scorpio season, right? We're in this 11 gate portal, the month of November, where Scorpio season kind of takes us into the death and the cycles of rebirth. And the veil is really thin at the very beginning of the month near Halloween. Why Halloween even came into existence, it was because we were in the portal where they say the veil is at its thinnest and where we are so connected with the other side. And that means both in the good way and the spiritual strength and integrity of it, and in the way that if we have stuff that we've been kind of like shoving under the spiritual rug or like trying to push behind the veil of existence and pretend that it's not there, like Scorpio is going to pull that curtain back and make you look at it, and not just look at it, but feel it and be with it and go through your own mini cycles of life, death, and rebirth. And that's kind of what COVID ended up being. I kept saying it was like these like little mini ego deaths over and over again, where I just had to kind of confront the endings of things. And though I knew I wasn't going to die by any means, it really was like you're in Scorpio season and you can't always run to the things that are new and life-giving and the beginnings, right? It's like you have to spend time with the endings and the darkness and the the portals of pain that you have to go through to be rebirthed into your next lifetime. So it's because Scorpio season is coming to a close, right? And like I think about a week from now, that we felt like it was important to kind of get this conversation in so that we could work with the gateways of, the month of 11 and be able to really kind of tune into that scorpionic death, rebirth, transformation cycle. And, the ancestors, like they come through at different times in people's lives, but there is this kind of like resonance and recognition that at this time of year, it's really easy for souls to cross over to the other side. So there's a lot of people that have a very significant death date at this time of year. And that's not saying for everybody, because I know Holly, like you took the other side of the year, like you had a big portal of death that was like when things were blooming and the sun was starting to come out again. And so there's something to be said about that, right? Holly and I hold like the opposite ends of the spectrum. So this isn't like a end all be all, but this is a time when, because the veil is so thin, it's easy for souls to cross because the ancestors are there waiting for them. Their people are right there on the other side, and it makes it just a little bit easier for those like spiritual hands to kind of grab through the veil and pull those that are ready to cross over and be with their death date and move into that next channel of the cycles of life. So we're talking about this today for those reasons and many more. And Holly's going to kind of tune us into kind of some of the bigger topics that we're going to talk about today. And we'll kind of prelude that with saying that like we're going to get into some nitty gritty. We're going to get into some conversation that could stir some things up for you and could touch on some pain maybe that you either haven't recognized or haven't spent a lot of time with, or shoved behind that curtain, and we're doing this hopefully in a very loving way. Our intention is to always kind of bring these topics through with a lot of intention and with a lot of awareness of like the depth and the capacity that we're speaking to in these conversations. But we did want to acknowledge that when you're starting to talk about ancestral healing, that it's not just the abundance of spiritual support that's on the other side, that you also you have to basically start kind of tapping into the healing work that has to be done through the ancestral lines too, because when you kind of open the gates to receive the support and the guidance and the mentorship, you're also opening up the gates to the other side of the coin, which is pains and traumas and things that have happened throughout the lineages, throughout human history, that need to be healed. And most of our ancestors did not have the capacity for healing that we do now. They didn't have the technology for it. They don't have the communities for it. They were many times stripped from their cultural and religious ceremony and ritual. And so it's being asked of us, it's being asked of us on a lot of levels to look at all aspects of this line that we've incarnated into and what we really chose when we chose these bodies and chose our parents and chose who we were going to be in this lifetime. So Holly, maybe you can kind of dig a little bit deeper into that and into why we're just feeling the need, like the loud call to do this kind of work at this time.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, most of the humans who are alive today have been touched by abuse or victimization, violence, slavery, colonization, and so many other like forms of atrocities. And it just goes back generations and generations. A lot of us, our ancestors, many of the people living in the United States today have been touched, like everybody has been touched by colonization, like everybody on the planet. I don't think any group of people has really escaped that that just huge like atrocity and human wound. So there's that. And then there's the violence that has come from that. And, hurt people. So when there's this huge population of people who have been hurt by another group of people. Uh, of course, those people are hurt and they're going to, it's not like they really have a lot of tools to deal with their pain, especially people who were um, removed from their homes or people, uh, yeah, there's so much there. And so basically the effects of this pain that people have suffered from um, directly, it just trickles down through the generations, each generation. And if it's not addressed, it just keeps going, it just keeps passing through people. Um, so our intention with that is that we can't exactly like heal ourselves completely if we don't address this, if we don't address the hurts and the wounds of our ancestors. And I think that, this can both come from the victim standpoint of the violence, the victims of the colonizer uh, people, and also the abusers. There's pain in abusing and causing harm to other people as well, and there's a almost like more pain or like a darker pain, or there's some. It's just pain, but it's like, yeah, it's just there's so much there, and there's so much that we want to stop in its tracks, like all of this, like supremacy, the supremacy wound, that um, victim wound. Like there's these just different wounds that we really want to stop in their tracks so that they don't go forward anymore. And these pains, these wounds can go down generationally, but they also trickle outward, everywhere, like everywhere that person goes and everyone that they interact with, like they are, if you're dealing with huge amounts of pain and wounding, you are acting from that pain and from that wound. And if you are not conscious of it, you are going to move that through other people. You're going to move that through your children. You're going to move that pain out of yourself because you were trying to get rid of the pain. And if you don't deal with it in a conscious way of acknowledging it and working with it, then you end up blowing it through other people by perpetuating it. And yeah, so this is kind of what we're talking about, and a lot of, stuff can come up around this work that's really heavy and really dark and very Scorpio. um, and it just feels like really important, and it's been a really important step for Eliana and I to take in advancing our own healing and in our own healing practices and the work that we've done personally. So, Eliana, would you like to kind of share a little bit about how you've done some of this or how you've experienced some of your ancestral healing work?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, well, it was my mom's death that really kind of grounded me into what it means to be working and connecting with your ancestors. But I did um, sit by my grandmother's side and kind of hold space for her as she was passing over 3 years before that. So it did start to trickle in. And it's interesting, actually, now that I'm talking about it, the ancestral healing work for me really began with my maternal lines, right? As what I'm talking about, my mom and her mother, my grandmother. But it started before my grandmother actually passed. And so my grandmother lived into, a very old age. I think she was like 94, something along those lines. But she was one of those people that she kind of kept coming to the brink of death, and then she kept coming back, and she kept going to the brink of death and coming back. And she had, seen everyone she loved had passed, all of her friends, her husband. Like she had just witnessed so much death that when she kind of got to this point in her life, though she wasn't like crippled or in pain or anything, she was ready to go. Her spirit was ready to move on a few years before she passed. And upon like my second or third spiritual awakening, who knows which one it was, but there was like a very big ask of myself to start to heal the divine feminine lines running through my body. And in that request, at the time, I didn't necessarily know that it was coming from my ancestors. I thought it was all about me. You know, I'm a Leo sun, so I first always think I'm the center of attention. And then I realized that my North Node is an Aquarius, and I'm here to support the collective way more than the collective is here to support me. And so it was in kind of doing the work, and in doing the work it was like freeing up my feminine energy. It was going to, you know, women's campouts and starting belly dancing and getting off of hormonal birth control and doing these things that just started to free up the feminine energy in me. And each step that I was guided forward on that path, I watched my grandmother walk closer and closer to her death. And it was like the more I was able to heal the parts of myself that I had inherited from her. And, you know, these are like, we can inherit the gifts and the blessings and the love. We do inherit all of those things. And at the same time, you know, we inherit everything that they either don't have the capacity to heal in this lifetime, that they missed the choice points to be able to heal in this lifetime, or that they called in a future ancestor. They called in an offspring to help them do this healing work for them. And I very much know that a lot of my healing work is so much bigger than me, right? It's like it's for me, but it's always been for everyone that came before me. And though I may not have children, like it's for the future generations that come after me. So in doing the work of this divine feminine line, I watched that the more I healed, the more I found closure, the more I found wholeness, the more I reclaimed parts of my soul, parts of my fragmented feminine, my feminine wounding, and healed those within me, that I saw my grandma get to let go a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, until finally I had gotten to a point where I felt something free up in my body. And I knew that that meant that her soul was going to find her freedom. So she passes, grandmother passes. I think my job has been well done. I did all the work that needs to be done. And then it was like, you know, when a loved one passes, like their energy doesn't die, right? It just transformed. And so the energy that's still here and meant to be on this planet and meant to be living, it gets passed down. It gets passed down generationally. It gets passed down to all of those who were teachers or receivers of that person's message, wisdom, or guidance. So I received the kind of the next level of the request of the ancestors. And it was still this very feminine focused healing. And I didn't understand that at the time because my mother wasn't dying. She wasn't diseased. She wasn't sick even. But after she passed, I can now look back and see that I was doing ancestral healing to also free up my mother's energy so that my mother could find her freedom, so that her soul could find the freedom that it was seeking. And, you know, upon my mother's passing, like the ancestral work has amplified to an enormous extent. You know, my whole altar space has become a shrine basically to my ancestors. If you're watching on YouTube, like I have pictures just like all over my space, because I realized that like I'm not here to do the work without them, and that they're going to continue to initiate me into the rites and into the medicines of this line. So in the kind of process of my mother passing away and me receiving all of her energy and all of her healing work that had been yet to be done, but that she now entrusted in me, it was clear that upon her passing, it was very much of like, I'm now entrusting you to finish this work for us, to finish for the mother line. I'm the last of my mother line. If I don't have children, my mother line ends with me. And I also then, in that kind of like feminine healing, the mother line healing, started having my paternal grandparents kind of come online. It was like when my mom died, the rest of them got to kind of show up and realize that I was kind of doing this work for the line and that I had done so much for the mother line that like now there was more space to hold for the father line. And what was interesting about that was that the healing that had to be done there, it wasn't so um like like with my grandmother and my mother, like it was very human experiences that I was healing for them. It was betrayal of a loved one, you know, it was hurt from from feminine friendships. It was these kinds of like, oh, I get where this is coming from, I see how this plays out in my relationships. But when my father line healing decided to appear and show itself, it was where the medicine in that bloodline had been blocked and stopped, and where the magic had to go into hiding because of trauma and abuse that had been done to that bloodline. So it was a door opening basically to a medicine cabinet that I didn't even know existed. And it was a medicine cabinet that had been in my paternal lines since the beginning of at least this kind of soul that I'm embodying now's incarnation, like time and time before that. But in receiving of this medicine cabinet of these new healing traits and being able to see now how my grandmother kind of kept these medicines sacred and secret, and how my grandfather went into the matrix to kind of hold the line in a way that wouldn't be seen or prosecuted by anyone outside them. I also had the veil lifted on why those medicines were blocked, why they went underground, why they cut themselves off from being able to access their personal connection to source, their personal connection to God. And then it was all of the trauma of being a Jew who has, you know, and this also comes from my mother line, but it came in different ways. But being a Jew who never had a land to connect to. And in the journey of like learning about my ancestry and doing a DNA research and looking into like where I'm from so that maybe I could connect to a piece of land that could help ground me into the history, the cultural significance of my ancestry, it was revealed to me that I am more connected to a group of people than I am connected to any land in the world. And for a lot of the ancestral healing talk, it's like, go back to the land, right? It's like, follow your traces of your lineage back to the land from which it came from. And for me, it was, my line has just been escaping persecution from the Egyptian days, according to the Bible, you know, from the time where we were slaves to the people that were in power. And the continuation of this, like Judaism is very sacred and it's very old magic, and it has a lot of connections to God that like are not available to most people because it had to go underground, it had to become dormant, it had to protect itself from persecution. So this is like a really long response, but it's like, yeah, there's like this very human aspect of the healing of like the grandparents, like in their human life of what they didn't get to heal. And it opens up the gates to the whole line, to the very beginning of time, to the times of Africa, um, from which we were all born, and what caused certain people to follow different routes of incarnation, soul groups of incarnation, you know, throughout the world, throughout the earth, throughout the human experience. And so now in my ancestral work, it's like I'm recognizing and uncovering like a lot of pain, a lot of persecution, a lot of never having a home, never feeling safe, always worrying if your neighbor was going to turn on you, always wondering if someone that you trusted was going to give your power away to somebody else, and never being able to fully trust humanity. And so we very much are, we're a culture and a race, and that's because we've had to kind of group together as these people and fend for ourselves. But in the work I'm doing now, it's being shown to me that in this lifetime I get to branch out again, that I get to reconnect with my soul family beyond just the ancestral lines that we're in, but also the soul lines and the soul lineages, and how, you know, like people like Holly and I, like we're not family by blood, but we're very much family by soul, and learning to trust these other races again, these other cultures, these other beings, and find a place where we can all become one large human family, where we can all remember that we are all connected, though we are different. Um, and that we can do the healing work for all those that came before us and for all those who are coming after us. And it feels like now is the time to do that work, to, like Holly said, just stop the things in their tracks that need to be recycled and be reborn and be recreated into a new future. So, Holly, will you share with our listeners kind of your experience with your ancestral healing and what's come through for you as you've gone down this journey?
Yes, absolutely. And um, like you, my journey kind of started with the mother line as well. Um, I think maybe just like having a womb and having that womb connection, like all the way up the line, like that's maybe where we feel it like the most like viscerally connected as women. Um, and also having a womb, you're so also more connected to the birth, death cycles, you know. So I I think that the first kind of time I really opened up to ancestral healing was when I started noticing some wounding within my throat chakra. And I had this huge wake up call in my life. I actually got into a car accident and I had really bad whiplash in my neck. And I think in my lower back a little bit too. So like a little bit like more root chakra, but definitely in my neck. It was just like very like, and then I think I'd gotten sick like the week before and totally lost my voice. And then got this whiplash like soon after. And I was like, okay, universe, like, what are you trying to tell me? I am of the mindset that your body speaks your mind, and everything that your body is going through, like illness, disease, is related in some way to your human experience and what is taking place in your body and maybe ancestrally also. So I was getting a lot of messages: throat chakra, throat chakra, throat chakra, there's wounding here, you need to work here. What And I was asking myself, what does this mean for me? And looking back in my life and learning how I had kind of been maybe trained to subdue my truth, alter my truth in order to receive love, in order to receive acceptance from my family, from my mother. And I think that the style of parenting that is prevalent is like the major like authoritarian style of parenting is really the root of that, and just the practice of that was I think that that was really at the root of this pain that I was feeling and dealing with. And authoritarian style parenting goes back generations, and I really think that it kind of can come from this like pain and wounding that our ancestors have gone through, that it's not really a natural way to parent. I mean, in some forms, I think it is because it's how we are governed. We're governed in an authoritarian system. So it makes sense that each system, a workplace system can often be authoritarian. Your boss is the leader, is the authority. You have to do what he says or she when he says it. It's like very, there's just authoritarian threads that kind of trickle down all of the systems too, just like the generations. And so, yeah, so I was really feeling this deep throat chakra wound, and it inspired me to do some healing work with speaking my truth and just kind of fully embodying who I am and my own unique thoughts and messages and feelings for my family and for my lineage. And that really helped move a lot of stuff between me and my mom, which was really, really powerful at the time. It felt so good. I actually ended up writing her a letter of just voicing everything that I felt like I couldn't voice when I was growing up. And this was just a couple years ago. This was just like 4 years ago or something. So well after I moved out, but after reflecting on my childhood and just growing up, and seeing that, hey, this felt wrong. Like I feel wronged. And I know that this is a normal like parenting practice that you were practicing, but it still hurt. It still felt wrong. I still received a lot of pain from it. And there's other stuff there as well. Um, but I think that a lot of it came from this very authoritarian state of mind that you will do as I say. I am in control of you, that kind of thinking. And I think that so many of us can probably relate to this because I don't know anybody who's been raised any other way other than the authoritarian way. Um, but yeah, that was a big opening for me, was just working with my throat chakra in this way and speaking the messages to my mother, that I had never spoken before, that I had never brought to the surface before. And there's this wound in my mother line, um, of deep pain, I think, and deep kind of victimization. And I was looking into my lineage I think like a year or two ago. I more deeply looked into it because I knew that my grandmother, my mom's mom, was from Puerto Rico. And then I had thought that we were just from Puerto Rico. And then a couple of years ago, I found out that my grandmother's father was from the Dominican Republic, actually, and he came to Puerto Rico where he met my great grandmother, who was from Ireland and came directly from Ireland to Puerto Rico. That's where they met. So this whole time, my whole life, I thought that my family was from Puerto Rico, but in fact, we were actually they were just living there, and my great grandfather actually came from the Dominican Republic. And that island was actually the first island that Christopher Columbus sailed to and started doing his whole colonization thing. And there was so much pain and so much suffering that he caused the people of that island, who were, as far as I know, as far as I've researched, a very peaceful people. They tricked them and they took advantage of them. And just to see how this has kind of so, and basically, Columbus, when he came with all of his men, he came with all men to colonize. They needed women, so they ended up kidnapping and stealing and taking a bunch of women and having children with them and starting their colonies with them. And so it's like, okay, you just did all of these horrible things to your family now. And so there is both this, this colonizer, this oppressor energy within my bloodline, and this victim energy within my bloodline. And I think that that is probably how a lot of people are right now. I think that it's two sides of the same coin, and we are all one. That's such a symbolic story of that, like you just did this to your future children. You just did this to your children, your family, your the line, the legacy that you're leaving now. This is what you have done. And oof, yeah, that really, when I learned that, was a really big moment. And just to really learn like what I'm working with, but also what so many people on the planet right now are working with, this energy of healing both the oppressor energy within them and the victim energy within them. And so, and there's a lot of pain that comes with like the victim, and kind of being able to break free from that victim mentality once you are no longer in a place of being oppressed. And so, these things, they kind of linger with us. And I think that, learning that about my family, and just being able to see the pain kind of trickle down. My great grandfather kind of abandoned his family, as far as I know, and left my great grandmother to raise her children kind of by herself. And there was a lot of pain there, and there was a lot of pain that trickled down to my grandmother, and then more pain coming down to my mom, and then it came down to me. And, I see it so clearly. And so I think that part of the work that I have been doing in my family is just to be a clear channel of my clear, authentic self, and to release some of these fears of of saying something that they're not going to like, of displeasing them, of kind of, being afraid to lose their love, I guess, because of who I am. And I think that it's been interesting to kind of look at that with my mother and see that in my mother too, that there's this kind of perfectionism thing, that like thread that runs through, I think, especially authoritarian like families, that this thread of needing everything to be perfect. No, not everything to be perfect, but needing everything to look perfect to other people. And oof, yeah, that's been a really big thing to shed, and to just be just like, no, we are going to be raw, we're going to be real, we're going to talk, have these conversations, and do the work and be authentic and not have to change ourselves for someone else.
Mm.
It shouldn't be like that. I think that a lot of us are kind of learning that more and more. Um, so that was a big thing for me. And then when my daughter came to me also was a huge moment in my like ancestral healing work and in that realm. Um, Birthing a new ancestor, a future ancestor, an offspring, um, was really powerful. And I actually, her spirit came to me in a really beautiful way that I could feel. I was in this kind of psilocybin ceremony space and receiving this vision of my ancestors, this group of people all around me, and they were cleansing me with smoke, they were clearing my energy, they were doing energy work on me, and they were clearing out my womb. And this was right after my accident. This was right after I had been working with my throat chakra, and right after I had sent this letter to my mother and done this maternal ancestral healing. And then and then I'm having this vision of my ancestors clearing me, and I'm like, what are you clearing me for? And then I have this vision burst through of this beautiful figure, this beautiful blue figure with long curly hair coming up out of the ocean and coming towards me, and her spirit came into my aura, and I was like, this is my daughter. I know, like, my daughter's spirit just came to me, and I am open and I am willing, and we are like ready to receive you. And then, um, my husband and I conceived in an intentional ceremony, and we invited her spirit in. And then, sure enough, we found out we were having a girl, and it was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And it just is, yeah, it's been really powerful. My whole parenting practice with her has been ancestral healing work, which has been to do this kind of new style of parenting, aware parenting, which I would love to talk about on a future episode. But it's not authoritarian. It's it's almost very what is it? It just honors everyone. It honors everyone's need. It, like, if an authoritarian style of parenting is like, my needs come first, like the parents' needs come first, and then the kids' needs kind of come last, or like when it's convenient, then aware parenting says everybody's needs matter. And I love that, because can we just like bring that up a couple pegs to like our system of government and acknowledge that everybody's needs matter. So practicing this style of parenting has been a huge way to work with my ancestral healing, working with it in a way that's giving forward, in a way that is benefiting the next generation, and stopping my own family patterns of pain and flowing pain through other people.
Mm.
So that was long-winded, but ancestral work is long. It could take a lifetime and even longer, as we're finding out now.
Yeah, I remember when I read a study a couple years ago that said something, from a scientific perspective. So for anyone that needs the science, that like the egg that made us, was alive inside of our mom when our mom was in the womb of our grandmother. And
Mhm.
so that in, a very physical sense, like we experienced physically what any pain, any trauma that our grandmother was going through before we were even like an inkling or a thought in anybody's mind. And I'm sure that if they had the research, they could probably say that these eggs, these cellular follicles, like lived beyond that before that. So we've in essence been living the experiences of our ancestors from not a conscious place necessarily, but from an embodied place of literally being in the bodies of these people that have recreated and recreated and recreated to form who we are now. So it's a beautiful conversation, and as Holly was saying, like it's a conversation that can't be just broken down in this 1 hour. It's a healing that won't be done in probably just this one lifetime, though I think we're really going to try.
Yeah.
And I think we have a lot of tools to do it. But that we're working with more than just the spiritual aspect of this. We really truly are working with like the physicality of it in our body. And it's interesting the things that kind of start to come up that you can then associate to your ancestral lines that don't always make a lot of sense. Like I have some deeply ingrained Holocaust trauma that I've been uncovering lately. And though my grandparents did have to flee Germany and come to America because of what the persecution that was going on, they didn't live in the concentration camps. They didn't, go through the Holocaust itself. Like I didn't live in my grandmother's body while she was doing these concentration camp works. And yet, even still, I'm noticing that I have trauma from gas chambers and from heads being shaven and seeing hair on the ground and things that I would have never known came from this ancestral and right, not even my ancestral lines, but the Judaic ancestral lines that are, as Holly said, not just like linearly from parent to child, but also that spreads out culturally and with a group of people. If you're somebody that's here that has decided to do healing work, right? Like we heal, right? All of us that are listening are on some capacity in some way, shape, or form, honoring that we are here to heal. And so a lot of the times, like, yes, it will be your ancestors, but also if there are ancestors that don't have offspring, if there are beings that don't have a line that is willing to do the work, that work will often show up for you, and it will show up in ways that don't always make linear logical sense of how it got there. But if you start to kind of peel back the layers and look into the whys, or just ask the question of why do I have this fear? Where does this come from? What is this? Is this mine? And then let the universe kind of express and show like, yes, this is yours or it's not yours. And because it's here for you right now, like it is yours to heal, it's yours to work with, it's yours to give presence and intention and awareness to. Um, because it's you've become a vessel for it, right? Like in some, either your human self or your soul self invited in that the reciprocity and the ability to fill up with that pain and also to pour out that pain as water to the ground and nurturing to the earth and giving back some of the things that we don't need to keep carrying in our bodies, but like really we can just give it to be composted and be recreated. So yeah, I love this conversation because it's like, yeah, it's big. These stories that we're sharing of you and I might feel a little bit comprehensive. And yet it's like there's just so many layers that we could really be talking about and experiencing when we start to align to our ancestral healing work um, and how we can change and create a new life for the futures to come.
Yeah, exactly. I I want to talk a little bit about like because we've kind of touched on a lot of different aspects of ancestral healing, and I just wanted to mention and drop this into our little chat, our little podcast recording today that um you can like go back in time and heal things for your ancestors also. You can go back in time and heal things from your past. You can go back in time and like and put loving energy, you can put supportive energy into your lineage, into your family line, into the land that you come from or the community of people that you come from, and you can hold the space. You can hold the healing space. You can do the healing work from here. From this moment in time, you can hop back in time. I think some people call it quantum leaping, and you can do it. I mean, there's other ways you can do it, but that is a really, really beautiful and potent way to activate that work. And also to know that, like, if you do that, like, when you come back into the present moment, it's like, oh, it's already done. It's already working. I'm already doing it. I'm already doing the healing. And it's a really powerful and beautiful and trippy practice. And I think it can really like help um, just to take a little bit of our power back, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you kind of brought that into it because it's really psychedelic when you kind of accept and acknowledge that like all time is happening in this moment in time, and like it really just does require you to get present with what is like becoming present and real for you, and that you can cross over any time space boundaries and make all of that present. And so that's like also to say that like we don't have to get trapped in the past pain either. We don't have to get, one of my coaches says like past life drama causing present life trauma. It's like we don't have to go back there and get trapped anymore either. We don't have to get caught up and wound up in our trauma and in our pain. Like we as healers doing the healing work right now, like our presence and like yearning, wanting the intention to even think about our ancestors in this way, to even offer them ritual when we don't have really like a space for ritual or ceremony in our modern culture, in our modern religions. Like we don't hold the spaces that the ancestors way back in the day used to be able to hold for the passing of their loved ones, of their ancestors, of their people, of their beings. So though it's like, yeah, we can travel back in time, there's so many things we can do, and it's like we don't have to do much more than just be present with them and just be present with the fact that there was pain and be present with the fact that we can send healing energy back in time without having to take their pain on into us or take more pain on into us, that we really can hold the frequency of peace, right? Holly does peace crafting. She's a peace witch, and her work is like holding the frequency of peace, and it's like that frequency, like it pervades all time and space, and you can send it to all time and space, and you can entangle yourself, right? Like there's a post going around that's like we are all entangled in one another, quantum entanglement, like science
Mm.
shows. And but it's like, can we entangle with peace? Can we entangle with healing? Can we stop entangling with the pain and the trauma of the perpetrators? Because that also, right, is like that trauma that gets passed on, like that's part of colonialization, like it's part of this capitalistic system that like keeps the people that are on the bottom of the pyramid, you know, getting stomped on by the few people that are at the top that are not taking on that pain or trauma for anyone. They're really just doing it to self-serve, mostly themselves, I guess, also probably their line. But we're flipping the pyramid, you know, and it's like those that have been on the bottom are really getting their chance to kind of rise up and stand up and recognize that they don't have to consent and play that game anymore, and that we don't have to continue to take the pain of the perpetrators on anymore. Like we can send that back to sender. And in doing so, that, you know, it sounds painful, right? If they've inflicted a lot of pain, and yet they are the only ones that can heal their pain, right? And the martyrs and the victims and those of us that are on the healing path that may have felt like we have to take on the pain of the perpetrators in order to heal it, like we're also rewriting that script too. Like we're rewriting the martyrdom script, we're rewriting the archetypal story that like we have to be in pain in order to heal, or that we have to be in pain in order to be a woman, or that we have to be in pain in
Mm-hmm.
order to be witches or magicians or different. um and really saying that like no, like I can be a frequency keeper of peace right here and now, and I can send that to all time and all space, and I can do that from a place of integrity and um real embodiment, right? I don't have to keep dislocating from my body in order to heal others. Like I can do that from just holding my center. So I love
Right.
that you brought that up.
Absolutely. And I love that, like, you can also do this just in your own little microcosm. You can do this healing work and you can do this. You don't have to like go and you, like you were saying, take on the pain of all of these perpetrators. You can show up fully in your life with love. You know, Mother Teresa says, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family.
Mhm.
And just like yes, we need that. We need to be coming, we need more love. We need to fill ourselves up with more love and compassion for ourselves to be able to heal the pain within our own selves. And then back in time, our ancestors, and then our future ancestors, and and our current present life, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, our families need our loving presence also. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're consenting to the mission of healing and the WeHeal vibe and intention, then our families need our loving presence. And I understand that some people might have some hard boundaries with certain people in their families. I am one of those people, so I acknowledge you. And you can also show up lovingly from afar, from a distance, and do that distance healing work we talked about. Um, yeah, it's important work. And just knowing that, like, I think that sometimes we can get down on ourselves because there's so much healing work to do in the world. There's so much that needs healing. Like, how can we go in and heal all of these people who are like burning the world down, or like trying to go up to outer space and leave us behind? It's like all that we can do is all we are meant to do. All, like, we are in our lives, we are on the land that we are on, that we are existing on. Like, the universe conspired to put us exactly where we are, in exactly the family that we're in order to give our messages and to do our healing work and to show up and to just be in presence and witness with what's before us.
Mhm.
Unless you're a manifester. And then I don't know how that works, from human design. Then maybe the manifestors are the ones that have to go go to the big guys and
That's why we need
heal
healed
them.
manifestors too, because we got manifestors out here creating new paradigms and they don't even know that they're the ones manifesting entirely new worlds.
Exactly.
Were there any other ways that were coming through for you, Holly, of how people can start to connect with their ancestors now, and some healing work that people can do? Anything else that might have just dropped in the last few moments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we touched on so much stuff just within what we were sharing earlier that I would like to kind of recap a little bit. But yeah, so ways that you can work with your ancestry and ancestral healing and kind of start digging into that realm would be to learn about your ancestry, like to first learn about where you come from and where your family comes from, and also to kind of witness their lives if you're in their life. If you're in like your grandparents' lives and your, aunts, uncles, mother and father, like, ask questions, like, have conversations if you can, like, ask about your ancestors that you didn't get to meet. that have passed on before you were born, maybe, but that they had connections to, start kind of digging into your family dynamic and if there was any like hurts or wrongs there or like how those people showed up in their lives and in their roles and just learning about your family history too can kind of like start to get you into this realm. Let's see. And we talked about quantum leaping, quantum healing. And Eliana, I know we were talking before this about like kind of working with the ancestors and with altars and candles. You want to share a little bit about that, kind of
Yeah, I
about that
mean,
kind of work?
yeah, definitely building an altar specifically for your ancestors. And it doesn't have to be a big altar. It can be a small altar with a couple of pictures, lighting a candle for them, it's all about intention, right? So it's if you put a couple photos and you put a couple things, like maybe there's a plant that reminds you of your grandmother or an herb that she liked to use, or you can ask them too, like, what do you want placed on the altar and see like what kind of shows up. I remember the first time I left food for my ancestors, and that doesn't necessarily come from my culture, but it felt really resonant and important to do. And the food that they requested of me was just like ridiculous. Like there was a couple like Jewish foods in there, but then it was like potato chips. And like my mom loved potato chips, so I know that was her, but the plate of food that I left for my ancestors, and this was probably at this time last year actually, it was just like it was like a very non-homemade meal. It was like a lot of crap, to be honest, like candies and things in there, but it was the intention, and it was the playfulness too. It's like they want to be playful, they want to play with us, like though we're talking about the pain and the traumas and the things that can passed on, like the soul in itself, like it's this eternal child, like it's this unharmed, untainted, unwounded space that we all have within us, that our ancestors, even in the hardest times, maintained that childlike essence, maybe buried deep, deep, deep inside of them. But that the soul, the soul is never wounded. The soul has lessons and it has lifetimes of challenges to teach us. So the soul can grow, and sometimes growth feels like growing pains, but in its essence, like the soul is playful. So when you start to work with your ancestors, like just know that you can be a little bit playful about it. And in fact, that's probably going to be more fun for you. It's going to be more fun for them if you're having a little laugh while you're pouring them a cup of tea or leaving them a glass of wine, or whatever it is, and then when you're done with the food, there's a couple things that you can do with that. Or when you're done with your offerings, you can give it to nature, you can compost it, give it back to the earth as if you were giving it back to the bodies that lay within the ground. You can offer it up to the earth as the earth as the ancestor, right? The earth is your ancestor. Lighting a candle is just a really kind of simple, quick way to just like bring light into the darkness, bring light into the moment, bring the light of awareness into their photo or into something that reminds you of them. And something else that kind of came through just like in the reading that I did beforehand was that, when you start to connect with your ancestors, like it is really important to connect with your benevolent, well transitioned ancestors. You don't want to be calling upon the ghosts that have refused to cross over and gone back to God and gone back to source. You can send them love and you can encourage them and you can tell them, like, I will not work with you until you've gone back to God, until you finish your incarnation path, because that requires them to do their own work and their own healing to be in the space to have a healthy relationship with you from the other side. So being very clear of what ancestors you are calling in, being very clear with what ancestors you do not want to work with, because we do, as Holly was saying, have most of us have, a perpetrator and a victim in our lines. And so both of those energies can show up. And as a human here embodied right now, like you have the utmost say in what you are consenting to and what you are calling in. You have the ability to say no to energies that you do not want to work with, that you do not want to heal, that you are not here to martyr for. And you also can be very clear about what energies you would like to receive. So it's okay to let there be some mystery, and it's okay to still let there be some separation between you and ancestors that you're either feeling very dislocated from or disconnected from or even in fear of. It's okay to have a boundary there. It's important actually to have a boundary, both with your human ancestors, the ones that are alive and well, and the ones that have crossed over, and to recognize that there will always kind of be this layer of mystery in that, and that you're not going to always see the whole truth, and there's a reason and a rhyme for that. And what is being veiled from you, that's probably been designed by your soul to keep you and your humanness somewhat protected from the grandioseness of your ancestral line, because it goes back farther than we can possibly imagine. And I also just keep getting the message like it goes back to our animals too, like our ancestors are animals. And I pulled the whale card before this, and it's like the whale is like the most ancient being on this planet. Like they say that the whale is like the living library of the ancestors beyond the ancestors, like the original ancestor codes. And so if working with human ancestors doesn't feel like something you're ready or willing to do, or that hasn't shown up in your life as a call to action, connect with your animal ancestors or your plant ancestors, or these very kind of earthbound, I will say benevolent, but also like they're neutral, right? Like these energies are neutral. They don't kind of come with their own human story. So yeah, when you start to connect, just one, connect first with the eternal child that is your soul, the unharmed perfection that is your being, that is all beings that you connect with. And it's okay to put up some boundaries. It's okay to be very clear about what you are connecting with, what you are here to heal, what you are ready and willing to work with right now. And then to remember that the plants and the animals are really important allies. Like we talked, of course, about this in our spiritual allyship podcast, but that they are also ancestors, and they do have a lot of the codes of this planet. They've carried a lot of the medicines of this planet that may have been stripped away from humans at some point. So also like going way back and getting like even more witchy, connect with your whale grandpa or grandmother and see what they have to say.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for sharing, Eliana. It's funny that whale card was coming up all the time when I was pregnant with my daughter, when I was like asking for like an animal spirit card for her. And she was, yeah, the whale kept coming up over and over and over again in like every reading that I did with her. So future ancestor, past ancestor.
Love that. We all know
Oh,
Isla's way ancient. She's way older than the two of us. We're just waiting to see
yeah.
what she has to teach us.
Totally, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our time here. Is there anything else we want to share? Are we ready to wrap up?
Think we're ready to wrap up. I guess just a big
All
thanks
right.
to the ancestors for giving us
Yes.
the freedom to be here having this conversation right now. It really is an honor and a privilege to be able to talk about these things so openly and without fear.
Mm. Yes. Thank you, ancestors. Thank you, listeners. That's all the time we have for today. We'd love to stay connected with you. So if you haven't already, please find us on Instagram. You can follow us at the_peace_witch, the peace witch, and at wellness_weaver, wellness weaver. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more magical musings here on WeHeal.